Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're unpacking a really fascinating psychological contradiction. If you love figuring out the hidden why behind the weird things humans do, you are definitely in the right place. We're looking at the psychology of people who keep their private rooms just incredibly messy, but somehow they look absolutely flawless out in the real world. It's this wild paradox of the polished persona versus hidden chaos. And honestly, the underlying reasons are probably going to completely change how you view a giant pile of laundry. Let's get right into it.
I want you to just take a second and picture someone specific. Have you ever known someone who looks incredibly polished, totally organized, and just perfectly put together in public, but literally the second you step into their private bedroom, it's a chaotic mess of clothes, scattered papers, and half-finished projects? Maybe it's a friend, a super successful coworker, or, hey, let's be totally honest, maybe you're picturing yourself right now. It is a wildly common phenomenon, and it really begs the question, how on earth can two completely different versions of the exact same person coexist? Now, what's absolutely fascinating about this stark visual juxtaposition is the massive gap between these two realities. On one hand, you've got the public life, polished, organized, looking like they've got everything completely under control. But then, you've got the private life, that chaotic mess of clothes and a literal graveyard of unfinished projects. The distance between those two worlds is huge, and it actually represents a really profound psychological split between our public and private identities.
Okay, let's dive into this first part, the exhausting social mask.
Let's peel back the very first layer of this psychological onion to really understand why this split happens. It's driven by what psychologists call the social mask. This is that absolutely perfect outward identity we were just talking about. But here is the critical thing to remember. The brain uses massive amounts of emotional energy to maintain this mask. Being so polished, saying all the right things, staying hyper-organized at work or at social events, it isn't free. It's exactly like having a heavy, high-powered app running in the background of your phone, just constantly draining your battery all day long.
So, because keeping up that social mask is so incredibly draining, something eventually has to give when that person finally crosses the threshold of their own home. When they walk through the door, that messy room isn't a sign of failure. It's definitely not a lack of discipline. Instead, it becomes this absolutely crucial safe space where they can finally, completely drop all expectations. Those clothes on the floor, they aren't just a mess. They're the physical result of the mask finally coming off. It's the one place where they don't have to perform for anyone, and their exhausted brain can finally stop burning up all that emotional energy.
Moving right along to our second psychological driver, decentralized focus and energy. This focuses on exactly how these individuals process their daily tasks and distribute their attention. And hey, if you've ever felt guilty about your own messy room, this should be incredibly validating to hear. The data actually tells us that high achievers and really fast learners frequently exhibit this exact behavior. And why is that? Well, it's because they operate with what's called a decentralized focus. They take their very limited, super precious mental energy and they devote it almost entirely to external goals. I'm talking about acing that big presentation, maintaining complex relationships, learning a brand new skill. They are just hyper-focused on outward success.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what is happening inside the brain of a high achiever. Imagine your mental energy allocation. You've got this massive, totally overwhelming chunk of your brain completely dedicated to external goals. And then, if you squint and look very, very closely, there is a completely non-existent, microscopic little sliver left over for folding laundry. It's kind of funny, but it's completely psychologically accurate. There is literally zero cognitive fuel left to spend on mundane, low-priority tasks. By the time they get to the bedroom, the tank is just completely empty.
To put a fine point on it, these folks are operating at a literal 100% capacity out in the world. When you devote absolutely 100% of your cognitive resources to your public life and your external ambitions, well, basic math dictates that you're going to have exactly 0% left for organizing your closet. The messy room isn't laziness, it's simply a byproduct of an engine that is running at maximum capacity everywhere else.
Now let's explore our third layer, the comfort of chaos.
So we've talked about emotional burnout, and we've talked about cognitive overload. But what if the mess isn't just an accident from being totally exhausted? What if it actually serves a very deliberate purpose? This brings us to a really fascinating insight about familiarity and comfort. There's a great quote that says, "To some minds, a sterile, perfectly neat room feels cold and pressured. For the longest time, society just assumed that everyone universally desires a pristine, minimalist living space. But the psychology actually shows us that for some people, an immaculate room doesn't equal peace at all. In fact, it triggers the exact opposite response. It just feels demanding.
When you compare these two different feelings, the picture really starts to clear up. A space that is hyper-sterile and super neat acts as a constant reminder of outside pressures. It's like living in a museum where you can't touch anything, and you feel like you have to maintain perfect posture all the time. On the flip side, a space that is slightly chaotic feels predictable, it feels lived in, and most importantly, it feels emotionally safe. To this specific mindset, the mess actually acts as a sort of sensory comfort blanket.
Breaking down exactly why a little chaos brings such comfort, we can see it provides some vital psychological functions. A slightly messy space is a predictable environment where things are left exactly as you dropped them. It feels inherently lived in, which actively signals to your brain that this is an emotionally safe space. And perhaps best of all, it physically represents an environment where all external pressure is completely dropped. Think about it. You literally cannot fail in a messy room because there are zero standards being enforced.
Which brings us to our final section, rethinking the messy room.
So, the crucial point is, knowing all of this about the social mask, cognitive overload, and the comfort of a lived-in space, we really have to completely reframe how we view this whole phenomenon. It operates as a distinct psychological loop. Let's just walk through it step by step. Step 1. The individual spends immense energy maintaining a perfect social mask out in public. Step 2. They devote 100% of their focus and cognitive fuel to those external goals, leaving absolutely nothing left over for chores. And finally, Step 3. They seek emotional safety and decompression in a slightly chaotic, completely judgment-free space at home. It is a highly functional, if slightly messy, ecosystem.
Which brings us to our ultimate takeaway. If you remember only one single thing from this explainer, let it be this. A messy room is not laziness. Let me repeat that. It is not laziness. It's a side effect of cognitive overload and a profound desire for emotional safety. We really need to destigmatize this whole thing. We are always so quick to judge the clothes on the chair or the unmade bed as some sort of character flaw, when in reality, it's often just a coping mechanism for a brain that is working incredibly hard out in the real world.
And that leaves us with a rather provocative question to consider. If a messy private room is the result of finally dropping the social mask, is a perfectly clean room really a sign of having it all together? Or is it just a different kind of mask that some people never actually take off? It definitely makes you wonder about the spaces we curate and who we're really curating them for, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredibly fascinating topic. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the surface, and I'll catch you in the next